Gregg Sarra with a very special edition of your Newsday High School Sports Spotlight. This time around, we're paying tribute to the best of the best. We're unveiling the All-Long Island football team chosen by the Newsday Sports Department. Let's begin with the field generals. The quarterbacks. Getting the nod this year, Sayville's Jack Cheshire, Oceanside's Charlie McKee, and Massapequa senior John Giller. Giller, the two-time All-Nassau selection, he passed for 2,121 yards and 18 touchdowns over his career. He also rushed for 672 yards and 12 scores. He was a true dual-threat quarterback. His performance in the Nassau Conference 1 championship game, it was epic. His mad scramble to avoid a big loss turned into a fourth-quarter first down and keyed the final winning drive. When the pressure is on, Giller's your man. Jack Cheshire, he passed for 1,519 yards, completing 103 of 159 passes for a completion percentage, wait for it, 65%. He passed for 17 touchdowns, and he only threw 2 interceptions, leading the Golden Flashes to a 6-0 record and the Suffolk Conference 3 title. His big night, he passed for a school record 500 yards in a win over West Hampton Beach. In his career, Cheshire threw for 4,394 yards and 56 touchdowns in only 2 years. Wow. We have more wow factor with Charlie McKee. The 3-year captain is Oceanside's all-time passing leader. He led the Sailors to a 7-1 record, completing 126 of 196 passes for 1,409 yards and 17 scores. He also added 488 yards rushing and 12 scores. The best, it's yet to come. He's only a junior. Now let's talk about the running backs chosen for the All-Long Island team. A trio of backs made the list this year. They are Ryan Isom from MacArthur, Leo Lopez of East Islip, and Massapequa's Tim Morrow. Let's begin with Morrow of Massapequa. His 35-yard touchdown dash down the visitor's sideline brought Massapequa its first Conference 1 crown since 1998. He was electric this season. He was used at wide receiver and halfback. He had 903 all-purpose yards with 14 touchdowns. And on defense, he contributed 32 tackles and 2 interceptions. And how about Ryan Isom, the hammer of the Generals offense? The hard-running Isom, he rushed for 1,307 yards and 14 touchdowns. Rushed for over 200 yards, let's say more than 200 yards, 4 times the most of any back on Long Island. Now to Leo Lopez. He came back from a lower leg injury the year prior to get East Islip off to a 5-0 start. The gifted inside runner had 128 rushing attempts for 1,088 yards rushing and 11 touchdowns. He averaged 8.5 yards per carry, and he's just a junior. Now let's talk about the speedsters who catch the ball. Bellport's Kashawn Parrish, Sayville's C.J. Messina, and Syosset's Luca Cutolo, they all made the cut. Cutolo was one of Nassau's leading receivers with 35 catches, 813 yards, and 9 touchdowns. 4 of his scores, they went for more than 70 yards. And what about Kashawn Parrish, one of Long Island's dynamic two-way players? He caught 18 passes for 379 yards and 7 touchdowns. And he added another 220 yards on the ground and 6 more touchdowns. He had 1 punt return for a score, and he also intercepted 4 passes and recovered a fumble. And then there's C.J. Messina. He had 37 receptions for 605 yards and 8 touchdowns in an offense that was loaded with playmakers for the undefeated Golden Flashes. Now let's shine the spotlight on the offensive linemen. Massapequa's Mike Rollo, Andrew Calderon of MacArthur, Isaiah Sadler of Floyd, and Joaquin Lorado of Floral Park. They were all standouts this season. We'll start with the intensity of Rollo, the 5'10", 250-pounder who led Massapequa to the Nassau Conference 1 title. He anchored an offense that averaged 39 points a game. He was called on to play every position on the line. He also registered 42 tackles and 8 sacks on defense. He will play for Western Connecticut. Andrew Calderon was a 3-year starter on both sides of the ball for the Generals. He was one of the best linemen as a junior on a senior-dominated team. And at 6'2", 250 pounds, he can run sideline to sideline on defense and is also a devastating blocker on the offense. Many times, he is seen on film driving his defender out of the play. Then there's Floyd's Isaiah Sadler. He's been the anchor of the Colonials' offensive line for 3 years. He makes all the O-line calls and directs the run schemes pre-snap on a run first, run second, basically a run all the time offense. He is a preferred walk-on at Stony Brook University. Now to Joaquin Lorado. The right tackle at 6'3", 265 pounds was like a wall for the Floral Park offense as he dominated the line of scrimmage, a real bulldozer. He also had 36 tackles, including 6 for a loss at nose guard. Now let's talk about a couple of special players who can do it all on both sides of the ball. 2 all-purpose players made this year's list. There are Joe Costatino from West Islip and Jack Cascadden of Garden City. Jack Cascadden was the do-it-all piece to the championship puzzle. He made the big plays when the Trojans needed them. He rushed for just over 500 yards, made key stops on defense, and his fake punt and run for a first down sealed the 14-7 championship win over MacArthur. And Joe Costatino was pound for pound one of Long Island's greatest players, a two-way impact player who made plays against a rugged Bellport team that had to be seen to be believed. He rushed for 833 yards and 10 touchdowns in 5 games. He also added 2 touchdown passes, one to Nolan Walters that clinched the Suffolk Conference II title in a comeback win over Bellport. Now it's time to honor the All-Long Island players who stood out on defense. Let's start things off with the big men on the line. Max Llewellyn of Sayville, Brian Benson from Floyd, Jake Wilson of Sean Wading River, and Brendan Staub of Garden City. Max Llewellyn, well, he was the emotional leader for the Golden Flashes. Whether it was big defensive plays or clearing the way for one of the talented halfbacks to score, it was all about Llewellyn. He was fierce on both sides of the ball. He had 37 tackles, including 12 solos and 5 sacks. And then there was Brian Benson of Floyd, known as a tenacious rusher who had 12 sacks in only 5 games for the Colonials. He had 32 tackles and 2 forced fumbles. He was also an outstanding blocking tight end. No one dared run to Jake Wilson's side of the field. He sealed the end and finished with 44 tackles, including 7 for a loss. His signature game came in the Suffolk Conference 4 title game, where he played halfback for the first time all season and rushed for 4 touchdowns and 101 yards in a 34-20 win over Mount Sinai. And if you want a guy that sheds the block, makes the tackle, and celebrates, then you want Brendan Staub. This guy was impossible to run against in the middle of that Garden City defense. He keyed another Nassau Conference 2 title run. Now to the linebackers chosen for this year's squad. And there's a lot of them. Andres Duran from Oceanside, Jason Singer from Syosset, Ty Kolar from Sayville, Phil LaRosa of North Shore, Liam Casey of Wantor, and Jack Winey of Lindenhurst. Andres Duran was a punishing linebacker who registered 45 tackles, including 5 for a loss. The two-way star also rushed 75 times for 519 yards and 5 touchdowns. He'll play college football at Hobart and William Smith College. And then there's Jason Singer. He was a 4-year player at Syosset, where he played both ways. His greatest impact came at outside linebacker, where he tallied 41 tackles, including 7 for a loss, and recovered a fumble. He also rushed 80 times for 585 yards and 12 scores. And Ty Kolar, what an active inside backer with a nose for the ball. Kolar comes from a long line of stud defenders. He finished with 47 total tackles, a sack, forced fumble, and an interception. If there could be a weapon on defense, he'd be the one. Phil LaRosa was an athletic linebacker who led the Vikings in tackles, who could also drop in coverage and defend the pass. He had 4 interceptions. He also added 769 yards rushing on 86 carries for an 8.9 yards per carry, and he scored 18 touchdowns. And then there's Liam Casey. What a tackling machine at Wantor. According to Coach Keith Sachs, Casey averaged 14 tackles per game. He finished with 90 tackles, including 18 for a loss. He led them to the Nassau Conference 4 crown with a 26-13 win over previously unbeaten North Shore. And then what about Jack Winey, the 2019 Burnett Award winner as Suffolk's top defensive player? As a junior in 2019, he was on his game this year, even in the COVID-shortened season at Lindy. They only played 4 games, But Winey was still awesome. He had 54 tackles, 3 sacks, and 2 interceptions in those 4 games. The 4-year starter, one of the best to ever play on Long Island. He also rushed for 321 yards and a touchdown. Now to the standout defensive backs. They include Lasan Hibbert of Hills East, Ryan Behrens from West Islip, Sable's Nathan Cassabury, and Brandon Ivy of Whitman. Lasan Hibbert was devastating on both sides of the ball. He returned 3 of his 4 interceptions for touchdowns. He added 675 yards rushing on 50 carries for another 13 touchdowns, an average of 13.5 yards per carry. Jeez. He returned 2 punts for touchdowns. He took over a close Connecticut game and in a 3.5-minute span threw for 1 score, returned a punt for another score, and punctuated the performance with a pick 6. And Ryan Behrens is 160 pounds of fury. He came up from a secondary position and laid the wood to many halfbacks this year. A fearless open field tackler and a guy that could run with anyone. In this shortened season, he still set the West Islip record for returns for touchdowns with 3. He will attend Brown University. And then there's Nathan Cassabury. He's your run support guy on defense. Speed across the field, man-to-man cover guy who had 33 tackles, including 11 solos and 3 interceptions. He's also a cornerstone of the Sable offense, where he caught 26 passes for 396 yards and 6 scores, including a 3-touchdown performance against highly regarded West Hampton Beach. And what about Brandon Ivy? He was right smack in the middle of a thrilling season for the Wildcats, who stormed into the Suffolk Conference 1 title game against Floyd. Ivy, a 2-way starter, grabbed 4 interceptions. He returned 1 for a touchdown, and he also had a 99-yard fumble return in a playoff victory over Longwood. He also had 15 catches for 240 yards and 3 touchdowns. Now to the coaches who did some remarkable work with their teams. Suffolk's Coach of the Year goes to Reed Sands from Sayville. He led the Golden Flashes to the Suffolk Conference 3 title with a 7-0 record. In Nassau, Kevin Shippos of Massapequa gets our endorsement. He led Massapequa into the Nassau Conference 1 championship game and guided them to avenge the only loss of the year with a staring 36-29 title win over Oceanside. There were tons of great players this year, and we couldn't include them all on our first team, All-Long Island, but they earned a spot on our second team. To check it out, go to Newsday.com to see which players made that list. I'm Gregg Sarra. Thanks for watching.